Welcome to Table Talk here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. 13 years strong. We're celebrating our 13th year here in the month of April. I'm Jeff Warren, and the NFL draft is right around the corner. We've been diving into the NFL draft over the past few weeks with some of the guests we've had. This week, no different. And we're closing out our draft segment, and I should say our draft podcasts before the NFL draft this Thursday with our good friend, Mike Raymond from Fox Sports Radio of the Lehigh Valley. Been a good friend of the show for many years. Mike, my friend, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
It's almost a brand new league year, so I'm excited to talk about it with you, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, you've been talking a lot about this NFL draft over the course of weeks now on Fox Sports Radio of the Lehigh Valley. By the way, folks, if you are watching on YouTube, you can see Mike's Twitter handle. He's also on various other social sites as well, Instagram. I know Blue Sky as well, at Mike Raymond LV for you audio listeners too. And, Mike's been dishing out some content with regard to the NFL draft with a lot of other sports talk as well. But as we look at this draft, there are some folks who are diving into it saying, a bit underwhelming at times. There are other folks that think there's some pretty good talent, maybe day two type of talent that are going to make an impact in the NFL. Where are your thoughts on this right now, Mike?
Yeah, I think you're finding that a lot of people are saying it lacks the punch of like, okay, well, we know that next year is going to be the quarterback rich draft. And if you're looking to move on and get that next franchise quarterback, maybe next year is the time that you do it. Look no further than the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to have to, come up with a contingency plan for Aaron Rodgers and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of teams that are just kind of waiting around. This year's draft, there's definitely some talent. You can definitely go after a lot of edge rushers early on, a lot of offensive tackles that people are getting really excited about, especially in the first round. Some playmaking wide receivers. So I think if you look closely at certain position groups, you might not have those big flashy franchise quarterbacks that everybody likes to attach themselves with outside of maybe Francisco Mendoza at number one. But, you're talking about some guys that, if you're looking to build up on edge rushers, on offensive line talent, this is a good draft to do that.
Absolutely. Now, look, before we get necessarily into the NFL draft, trades happen all the time in the NFL during the course of the offseason. And a trade that just happened within the past 24 hours, want to get your thoughts on. I wasn't surprised because we know that over the past couple years, the New York Giants and defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence, they've just been going back and forth. I mean, this is this isn't something that just happened this offseason. It's been basically a 2-year process of, is this guy going to be paid by the New York Giants? And the Giants are an interesting front office, to say the least. And we now know Dexter Lawrence being traded to the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Giants are now picking twice within the top 10 this Thursday night. It's interesting how this may at some point affect the NFC East down the road. Philadelphia Eagles have been division champs now over the past couple seasons. So obviously, being an Eagles fan, I'm interested to see what the New York Giants are going to be doing with these 2 top 10 picks Thursday night, Mike. What are your thoughts on this deal overall? And what's interesting to me is a team giving up the talent that Dexter Lawrence is. I mean, he's been to how many Pro Bowls at this point? I believe 3-4 Pro Bowls at this point. And I'm just amazed at this team consistently, in my opinion, kind of fumbling the ball, excuse the pun. I don't know. Maybe they didn't. That's why I want to get your thoughts. I mean, who do you think potentially, quote, won this deal? Cincinnati Bengals or New York Giants? What are you thinking?
So if you listen to the show, Happy Hour on Fox Sports Radio, I'm one of the regular co-hosts, and the other co-host who I split the time with, his name's Connor, and as a Giant fan through and through. He's actually lives in Jersey, not too far away. I was actually with him when it happened, when it came through the push notifications, and he nearly lost his mind. He blew a fuse. He was trying to enjoy his birthday, and ultimately it didn't work out that well. So we, tried to kind
Connor.
of good dude. I'm sure he'll be resilient. But, the first thing that I thought of when we heard the news break was, well, this is a new era of New York Giants football. And even more so from the front office standpoint, because you talk about Joe Shane, the longtime general manager for the New York Giants. He is still the general manager of this team, but it's a unique setup now with the new head coach and John Harbaugh. we found out that as part of his deal, he has a direct line to ownership. It's not necessarily, Joe Shane, and he doesn't necessarily have to go through the Joe
Yeah.
Shane a layer there. And I think this was a move that, from the top down, you're thinking John Harbaugh, I want to establish a certain level of, or just put his own stamp on it. I think he's a disciplined kind of guy. And I just didn't think that maybe from an organizational standpoint that they wanted to deal with the back and forth with Dexter Lawrence. I think they gave it a fair shot. You would have liked to see this happen when free agency opened up and, maybe get a little bit more for him, but to still get a top 10 pick out of it, I think you're getting something in return. And I think now it's on Joe Shane and the scouting department to come up with a really good plan to what you're going to do there. I don't think they'll be moving around too much. I would think you would pick at both 5 and 10. And, I think when it comes to the Bengals, you had a situation where Trey Hendrickson's moved on. So you need another anchor of that defensive line. And now Cincinnati has that. And you could say, well, why didn't they just draft a defensive lineman? Well, there wasn't too many defensive tackles that you were going to be taking at 10 there. So it's not a rich defensive tackle draft.
Yep.
So the Bengals got a proven commodity. And listen, this is kind of in the same vein as what the Rams have done. The Rams have made one first round pick in the past 10 years. So it's like, why not go for the proven commodity, on the defense? You could hope that you get a deal and, you have a young talent that you don't have to pay as much, but top 10 picks still get paid pretty well. So you're talking about, just getting a proven commodity on the a defensive tackle with Dexter Lawrence. And I think that he has an immediate impact right there for Cincinnati, and you're going to need it in that tough AFC North division. So I think it's win-win for both. Now, remember the last time the Giants had 2 first-round picks, it was Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. So you're going to need to hit a little bit better with 2 first rounds coming up here on Thursday.
Absolutely. And look, there is another New York football team. Some folks may have forgotten about them, but yes, folks, the New York Jets, another team that's going to be picking high in this draft, like the New York Giants, but the New York Jets are picking number 2 overall. And from reports, it seems as though they're going to be prioritizing defense with the second pick instead of trying to get that quarterback of the future that they've been wanting and needing for quite some time. You mentioned not necessarily a quarterback-rich class this year, perhaps waiting for next year to draft that franchise quarterback of the future. Mike, how do you see the New York Jets approaching the number 2 overall pick this year? And I'm asking this specifically because, look, frankly, not too many folks care about the Jets. They really don't, but because of the incompetence that we've seen year after year after year. But I think this is an interesting potential foundation for them, a foundational base pick that could lead to things in the future. Not a lot of talk is being given with the New York Jets this year. That's why I wanted to get into it with you here. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think the Jets, nowhere to go but up after a 3-14 season. And we know that the name of the game is defense. And I think, you want to get a nice cornerstone piece for that defense, a young cornerstone piece. To me, this is going to be the interesting part of the NFL draft. You don't have to wait very late in the draft. It's pick number 2, because, if you're looking at potentially taking that edge rusher, which everybody seems to think the Jets are going to lean towards, is it going to be David Bailey or is it going to be Arvell Reese out of Ohio State? I think a lot of people are pointing to David Bailey out of Texas Tech. He had a really, really great season last year, and, drawing comparisons to Nick Bonito, 6'4", 250 pounds. Like, he looks the part. He's probably the best player at that position. But you look at Arvell Reese and the way he's kind of constructed. He's a linebacker, but he's going to try to play that edge position. And he might be the best player in this draft defensively. Jeremiah Love might hold that title for the offensive side of the ball, but I think Arvell Reese, you look around and see these players in this draft, I think he has a really good claim to be the top overall defensive player in this draft. So will the Jets go Reese? Will they go David Bailey? I think that's the first fork in the road we see in this draft coming up on Thursday. And, I think they'll probably go David Bailey, but you never know. The Jets are just known to think back to the old, we could get Warren Sapp. We'll draft Kyle Brady instead of tight end.
Yes.
We'll do that. So you never know what the Jets are going to do. And that's kind of why it's kind of like a soap opera. You kind of just show up and watch the drama.
Absolutely. It's a great way to describe it, Mike. And I think as we pivot to the offensive side of the ball, and specifically the quarterback position, quarterbacks in this draft, most notably Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, Carson Beck out of Miami. Of course, a guy we've been watching for years as Penn State fans, Drew Aller. These are the quarterbacks being talked about possibly making some sort of impact in the NFL in the future. Look, we've talked about Mendoza a lot over the past few weeks on this podcast platform, and there's a belief that he can be a franchise-altering quarterback for the Raiders. I don't think that's necessarily disputable at all, but I'm wondering, how do you see some of these other quarterbacks really stacking up in terms of providing quarterback stability and really making a strong shift from the college ranks to the NFL ranks, which is extremely difficult, especially for a guy like we've been watching in Drew Aller for the past couple of years here. So what are your thoughts on these other quarterbacks?
If we're talking stability, I'm hesitant to attach that word to Ty Simpson just because we've seen just too small of a sample size thus far. He's looked okay. He's playing at Alabama, and he played at Alabama in a down year. But you argue that Ryan Williams was supposed to be one of these best wide receivers out there. Didn't really turn out for him either. Was that Ty Simpson? Was that the Kalen DeBoer offense? There's a couple different factors. It's been such a small sample size from Ty Simpson, from Kalen DeBoer, post Nick Saban. So I don't know who to blame with that. That being said, I understand there's a little bit of hype around him. And this might be the classic, we don't want anybody else beyond Ty Simpson. So we're going to have to come up and, into the first round, the back half of the first round, and maybe take a chance on Ty Simpson. And the best case scenario for Simpson would be that he has to go to a place where he can sit for a year or two and, do the Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre. And, let's see if he can fall into the right position. It's not like Fernando Mendoza. Like, he's going in week one. They don't even have like a backup contingency plan. Like, you are the starter. Here you go. Like, here's the keys to the car. I think Fernando Mendoza might have a little bit of growing pains. I think he's great in between the ears, but past Fernando Mendoza, I don't have a lot of confidence in the rest of the crop there. People say perhaps Carson Beck could be the best of the next tier. It's Mendoza clear the 1A, and then of course Ty Simpson like 2, and then Carson Beck is the best out of Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier,
right,
and I don't know, Taylon Green. That's kind of where my head goes. Now, in terms for Aller, this is the one thing that I will say for Drew. Lot of experience, mixed reviews as to his development from the NFL perspective, how they look at his development at Penn State and who was responsible for the lack of development. So there's
that's the lack of development. Yes,
right. That's to figure out. But I still think his traits, with the height and the vision and the arm strength, like, you can mold him into something. Now, will that be a starting quarterback in the NFL? I don't see that happening in 2026 or even 2027. But, if, again, falls into the right spot, he could potentially be a guy who could be a long-term solution. Like, I could see him being a Kirk Cousins. Like, when given the opportunity, he understands the game in a way that people will really like, coaches will really, gravitate to. So I think that Drew Aller could potentially be something. It's kind of on him at this point to prove his worth, because the tape leaves something to be desired.
Yeah.
In certain areas. I'll say.
It absolutely does. Dude, we've been watching him now for how many years? And the real question is, how coachable is he? I think at the end of the day, like, for me, when I'm looking at Drew Aller, how coachable is he? And I actually don't think we even know at this point, Mike. I don't think we know that.
Yeah, I think his intention and his dedication would be that he would invest the time necessary to be successful. Whether that translates into success on the field, I think he's going to need a lot of reps under the right quarterback coach and the right offense to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. We are going to take a break, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about a lot more NFL draft talk, what certain teams may be doing in terms of their team rebuilds. But again, we are talking to Mike Raymond from Fox Sports Radio of the Lehigh Valley. Buddy, promo some stuff out there before we go to break.
Yeah, for sure. If you go out to our website, go to lvfoxsports.com/draft. We have a draft contest. You can win some gift cards to some local restaurants here in the Lehigh Valley. And you can also see our draft board. We have an expert mock draft that We talk with different beat reporters and radio hosts and newspaper people from all the different markets in the NFL, and all of that content's available on our website. And you can see who we talked to, who they picked in our expert mock draft, which will conclude on Tuesday, April 21st. With the last two picks of the Patriots and Seahawks, the Super Bowl representatives. So we're almost all the way through here. But lvfoxsports.com, you can get all of our local shows, all the podcasts there as well. So check it out, lvfoxsports.com/draft if you want to get into the contest.
There you go. NFL draft is a fun time of the year, folks. And when we get back after this break, we're going to dive into more NFL draft talk. Stick with us. Right, we are back with our good friend Mike Raymond from Fox Sports Radio of the Lehigh Valley. And as we know, Mike, drafts are so important, building strong team in the future. A lot of NFL teams, they want young guys. They want it for the contracts. They want it for the energy. They want to be able to mold certain players. It's not only a science. The draft is not only a science, but a lot of teams actually end up missing out on talent because it's not a perfect evaluation process. You know, it really is a gamble at times. Which teams picking which players because of need? Are there teams that are just picking what they believe to be best available? It's always a fascinating process to me and how it has evolved over the years. That said, I'm wondering which teams, in your opinion, really need to have a solid draft to start shifting momentum for their team and their franchise over the next 2 years or so. I mean, for me, I'm going to say right now, I think the Carolina Panthers, yes, they got to the playoffs. They play in a terrible division. They did not have a good record, but I think that they can shift some momentum for their team and franchise with this draft in particular, where they could potentially be a threat in the NFC down the road. That's my team that I'm going to really be looking at from an overall perspective. What about you? In terms of what about you in terms of the team you're looking at?
Yeah, actually, when I was going to answer this question initially, I was going to go in the same division with the New Orleans Saints in the year two of Kellen Moore. Tyler Shuck seemed to be, this unknown commodity when they drafted him last year, and when given the opportunity and he was inserted as the starter there, looked pretty good. And you can say, is that Kellen Moore's offense, or is that the fact that they maybe got a steal last year in round 3? I want to say, yeah. So think about that. If the New Orleans Saints start the year a little bit better, or maybe even start the year with Tyler Shuck under center, what is this team looking like? They finished 6-11, but they had such a slow start. So I'm interested to see what the Saints do. I'm also interested to see a team like the Dolphins, who are in the midst of a complete rebuild. That is an interesting from starting quarterback all the way down. Malik Willis, is he going to be anything to write home about? Can Devon Achane be the same running back? Now that he is literally the feature portion of this offense, because all the other wide receiver talent is elsewhere. You got no more Tyreek Hill. You got no more
Jalen Waddle.
Jalen Waddle went out to Denver. So that's going to be another one that I'm interested in for. I would actually say the Raiders, but the Raiders, I think, took care of a lot of stuff in free agency, and I think they've kind of set themselves up nice. Now that's a tough division to compete in. But I still think they did pretty well via free agency. And then of course a team like the Arizona Cardinals, post Kyler Murray, what are you going to do? What's the identity of this team? Can you build it through the draft? Yeah, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., but Jacoby Brissett's your starting quarterback. So what are you putting around these guys to be a little bit more competitive in a division where, you have the 49ers, Rams, and the defending champions in the Seahawks. So those bottom dwellers, I always kind of gravitate to when it comes to the NFL draft. Like, how much of a difference can you make in one draft? And are you getting the value? Are you doing the best player available? Because you have a little bit more of a luxury there. A team like the Buffalo Bills, they have a pretty much complete roster, a franchise quarterback. They just need to put it together on the field. They have the assets, but there's so many different missing assets from all the teams that I just mentioned. So that's why it's a little bit more fun for me to watch those bottom dwellers from last year and how they can rebound it and build their team for the future.
Absolutely. Look, you just mentioned a team that I'm going to be fascinated to see what they do. Team you have followed closely over the years, and it's San Francisco 49ers. I mean, I look at this team. They've certainly made changes over the years, gotten rid of some talent. They've certainly added some talent as well, both on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. I've looked at the 49ers as a as as a franchise and a team that has been so injured over all of these years. And because of that, there has been specific retooling aspects of the team, yet they still remain a relevant team that folks should keep their eyes out for. And a lot of that is because of Kyle Shanahan too. And I wonder, how do you think the 49ers front office and Kyle Shanahan, how do you think they're looking at this draft in terms of their team building for the future and hoping to stay relevant, not only within the division, but in the NFC in general?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of things came into focus in the past 24 hours now that they have Trent Williams locked up for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
I know that John Lynch, the GM, had made statements that he was confident that this deal was going to get done, but until the ink is dry on the paper, you still have that apprehension. But Trent Williams, he hasn't been the healthiest, but when he is healthy, he is a freak athlete, and he is one of the best offensive linemen in the history of this league. So that's a huge piece. My big concern this year is how diverse can the offense be? Because outside of Christian McCaffrey last year, who they worked and worked and worked, and even when he wanted to come out of the games, he wasn't coming out of the games because Kyle Shanahan, maybe he wasn't getting the ball that play, but they needed the defense to respect the fact that he was on the field, catching the ball, running the ball, whatever they needed to do. So can the addition of Mike Evans and Christian Kirk in the wide receiver room, take some of the focus away from Christian McCaffrey? I hope so. And that gives Brock Purdy a little bit more, more weapons to kind of feed the ball to. Can George Kittle stay healthy? He's still one of the best tight ends in the league when healthy. They brought back Jake Tonjes at the tight end position. I think you got to figure out the left guard position, but I like where they're at in terms of the rest of the offensive line. And then on the defensive line, they got to figure out how to get after the quarterback. I think there was like a total of 20 or 22 sacks total for the year last year. That is unacceptable. Now I understand Nick Bosa goes down with an injury. You mentioned the injury problems, and with this microphone and this laptop and my ears, I have too much electricity around me right now. And I'm a typical 49er fan, and I'm so scared of what's going on in the substation that's next to the practice facility. No, but I kid, but they've just been snake bitten when it comes to injuries, and it's really hurting their chances in a window where you have so many superstars in their prime, but getting towards the end of their prime, especially when it comes to Trent Williams, who'll be 38 in a month or so. So, you got to find a way to get after the passer. I expect if they don't go wide receiver first round, I expect them to go for a pass rush, and they still need a little bit of help on the offensive line. But got to get Michael Williams healthy. You got to get Nick Bosa healthy. And Dre Greenlaw is back in the linebacker core after spending some time in Denver. It worked out well when he was there, right next to Fred Warner, who is the best linebacker in this league. I'm not going to even if you want to argue with me, fight me. He is the best linebacker in this league. But a lot of question marks, but some good, solid cornerstone pieces still part of this franchise.
Yeah, I think the 49ers should probably go pass rusher, given how the board looks. I think that's probably, from a strategic standpoint, best scenario for them, Mike. But as we're concluding our conversation here, I really just want to get some overall thoughts from you as it pertains to this draft. If you've been, I know you've been talking about it a lot on Fox Sports Radio, the Lehigh Valley, been talking about this draft and the talent. Are there any hidden gems in this draft that you really have your eyes on, perhaps in later rounds? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it depends kind of what the need is, obviously, but we're talking the most important quarterback position here. I would definitely look at Illinois' Luke Altmaier. He's a guy that, if we watch Big Ten football all the time, Jeff, we've seen this guy. He could be that nice surprise at the quarterback position. Guys like Cade Klubnik, who we thought were going to be one of the best players in college football going into last year. That stock is kind of down, and I like what I saw out of Luke Altmaier at the quarterback position. I'll give you a homer pick in Katron Allen at the running back position. Also really like Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska at the running back position. Now those guys are definitely day 3 guys. I'm definitely thinking that's where we're going to end up there. Tight end, Max Clare out of Ohio State. He's probably one of the top 3 on the board, but most likely a day 2 or 3 pick. Depending on the rush on tight ends. I think it's really just Kenyon Sadiq, who's a first round talent in the first round out of Oregon, and then it's kind of everybody else. People like the kid out of Vanderbilt, Eli Stowers. Yes. So he'd be an interesting one. Those are the couple guys that I have on my radar at this point.
Nice.
On the offensive side of the ball. What I really want to see is where Venga goes. Venga Ioane for Penn State. I think he's going to be a first-round talent, but he is the best guard on the board, and I'm really excited because he's going to be the first Penn State player off the board.
I really hope it's not a crap team. I just do. I always feel that way with Penn State players. I'm like, please just don't go to a crap team where you're going to languish your talent away because these certain teams just don't have a vision of what they want to do with certain talent. God, I hope he does. I hope he doesn't go to the Browns.
I can see a world. I can see a world where he ends up in like Detroit, like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 12 to 20. I can see him going. You got the Panthers, like you mentioned. You have the Vikings in there, the Lions. So I think a couple teams that could benefit from his services, or even just somebody like I would love if the 49ers got creative. They have multiple 4th round picks. If you can package something together and move up the board to grab Venga, that would really take care of a position of need for my San Francisco 49ers.
I tell you, it's going to be fun to watch this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, folks, the NFL draft. Our friend Mike Raymond from Fox Sports Radio of the Lehigh Valley, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on. It's always great talking with you. Let's talk more football in the future. We can talk some other sports too, for God's sake. I always have you on talking football, but you're a plethora of knowledge.
I appreciate it. Listen, if you want to talk baseball, I'm ready to go. NBA playoffs, I don't watch the NBA till playoff time. So
I can't even do it. I can't do it. The Sixers Celtics nonsense has just it's enraged me to the point where we haven't been talking about the Sixers much on this podcast. I can't deal with it. Can't deal with it.
I was saying earlier today, at least Joel Embiid isn't dealing with like a back injury or a knee injury this time. It's just regular appendectomy surgery. Like that's just you talk about the worst possible timing. It's
absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, we can talk blue and white weekend. That's coming up this weekend too.
Ooh.
Whenever you want to bring me back on, Jeff, I'm ready to talk.